Hello everyone, and welcome to my presentation, Success Tips for Beginning Educators. My name is Tara Perry, and today I want to share with you what I've learned through my field experiences. My work with the K through 1 bridge, after school education, and my observations from my field experiences, and the educational psychology theories that we've studied this semester. My goal is to help beginning educators step into the classroom with confidence, clarity, and the tools you need to support the diverse learners you'll meet. About me and why it matters. I'm currently employed as a K-1, so kindergarten and first grade bridge paraprofessional. The bridge class is essentially children that we prepare for general education. Now, we work closely with students with autism, sensory needs, anxiety, communicational differences, and I've seen firsthand how these theories, they come alive in real classrooms. Now, between my 2 field experience placements, I was able to observe both behavioral and academic patterns. I was able to identify formation. I was able to see bias and discipline and how classroom systems impact their learning and how different teachers are. This presentation is designed to give you my practical research-based tips that truly work across any instructional setting, whether you're teaching general education, you're teaching SPED, gifted students. Now, my first field experience observation report, it took place in the K-1 AU Bridge classroom, and it also took place in a general education kindergarten classroom. I was able to observe multiple students. They all had really different, unique needs, even ones that were similar from the SPED classroom to the general education classroom. They were stimming, anxiety meltdowns, sensory regulation, perfectionism, nonverbal communication, and elopement behaviors. I was able to see systems like token boards, desk boundary boxes, and a designated calm down corner being used daily. All of these tools supported student regulation and their engagement, but they really also revealed clear behavior patterns. We did see some students copy peer behaviors and other needed sensory breaks before they were able to begin working, or they required multiple breaks while working. I also was able to see the limits of classroom systems. So when a student needs exceeded the environment, this directly connected to behavioralism and the social learning theory. And that really showed how environment, reinforcement, and modeling can shape behaviors. For this slide, it talks about my second field experience, and I primarily focused on race, identity, and equality. Now, I talked about an experience that I was able to witness firsthand, how bias and labeling can shape a child's self-perception. I talked about a moment that really stood out, seeing a young African American boy recently corrected from an incorrect diagnosis, shut down completely after being called mean by an adult. It was such a powerful reminder that words stick, labels follow children, and the adult language influences identity formation. This experience for me also highlighted issues like the stereotyping, the opportunity gap, and the need for culturally responsive teaching. It really kind of changed the way I think about discipline, communication, and fairness in early childhood settings, and how important it is to understand these theories that we've learned about in play. Now, across both experiences, what I've learned is that behavior, identity, and relationships are so deeply connected. They're very intertwined. Now, how students feel about themselves directly impacts how they behave, how they learn. I've also learned that educational psychology theories like behaviorism, social learning theory aren't just textbook ideas, but they really show up every single day in classroom decisions. These insights shaped the 6 success tips that I'm going to be sharing with you today. And these tips, they can apply across subjects, they can apply across grade levels, they can apply across student populations. They are just a general reminder of the teacher that I want to be. My first tip would to be build relationships first. It is so important, and I have seen this firsthand be one of the biggest lessons that I've learned. These relationships come before routines. Now, students regulate through connection, not correction. Bronfenbrenner reminds us that developmental is shaped through supportive relationships in the microsystem. And like I said, I've seen this firsthand. When students felt understood, supported, and seen, their behavior improved. When they didn't, things escalated quickly. And being able to see this through my observations and working daily in the classroom, it has made such a difference to cultivate these relationships with students. Also, some strategies you could recommend is going to be daily individual check-ins. You're going to celebrate their strengths publicly. Even those small victories for those students can be a big win. Consistent communication with families, that will play into another one of my tips. And using culturally responsive language and affirmations for these students can help build that bond deeper. For my tip number 2, use positive reinforcement and predictable structure. Structure can help those students feel safe, and predictability reduces anxiety, especially for students with autism, ADHD, or trauma. Now, in my first placement, I saw that token boards, consistent routines, and calm down spaces were key. Now, when routines were followed, students thrived. And when they changed suddenly, behavior escalated. If you've ever been in a classroom and had a early release schedule, you can see those behaviors escalate a lot more because their predictable structure is no longer there due to the shortened day. Now, these all align with Skinner's behavioralism and Bandura's social learning theory, both of which remind us that the reinforcement and modeling guide behavior. Now, some of the tips I correlate with this, some practical ways to use structure and reinforcement effectively is going to be praise, desired behaviors, use visual boundaries like desk box, giving the students the freedom to move within their area at any time. Offer meaningful motivators through token boards. Pick something they like to work for. Avoid reinforcing negative behaviors with attention. You're going to model the behavior, the emotional regulation that you want students to use. These small actions, they create a predictable environment where students are going to feel safe enough to learn. Now, for my tip 3, challenge bias through cultural awareness. In my second field experience, I talked about how I saw profoundly bias and labeling impact students, especially African American boys. This identity development theory tells us that children really internalize these messages from adults. So when a child is repeatedly labeled mean or bad or a problem, that becomes part of their story. As beginning educators, it is so critical to challenge assumptions, to reflect on our own reactions, and to choose our language carefully. Now, some tips I have, or some strategies, is to challenge that bias and promote equality. Describe the behavior, not the child. Slow down, respond thoughtfully, and instead of reacting, ask, what is this behavior communicating? Track who gets praised and corrected the most. Offer multiple communication options for students. Every child deserves fair treatment, and our awareness plays a huge role in making this happen. My tip number 4, advocate for appropriate support and placement. One powerful lesson that I have learned was that sometimes classroom strategies are not enough. Some students need more specialized support or a different environment to be successful. This is where the advocacy becomes essential. Bronfenbrenner reminds us that environment shapes development, and we must speak up when that environment is not meeting a student's needs. So some of my strategies for tip number 4 is to advocate effectively. Document those patterns objectively. You want to start MTSS or RTI early. You want to communicate your concerns to the administrators properly. You want to collaborate with specialists, including your OT, your SLP, and your SPED teams. You also want to partner with families to strengthen that consistency at home and in school. Advocacy protects not only the student with high needs, but the entire classroom community. And tip number 5 is teach through different modalities, which is also known as UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning. Students learn in different ways. They could learn visually, verbally, kinesthetically, sensory, or emotionally. The UDL encourages us to provide multiple ways to engage, represent, and express learning with our students. Now, in one of my placements, I was able to watch students communicate through drawing, sensory tools, visual boards, when words didn't work. That multi-module access point makes all the difference for them. Now, some strategies for this tip. You want to use visual schedules and first then boards really help. You want to be able to offer sensory tools, movement breaks. You want to model tasks with gestures or think alouds. You could provide flexible ways for students to show understanding. Maybe they don't feel comfortable writing out words for their spelling test. Maybe hand them magnetic letters for them to spell out the word that way. Use emotion boards to support communication. Maybe I feel and I need boards. These practices make learning accessible for all students, not just students with diagnosed needs. And tip number 6, you want to partner with families and have open lines of communication. I learned that family partnerships make everything stronger. The clear communication. Now, when home and school align, the students are going to feel more secure. Their routines become more consistent and misunderstandings decrease. Bronfenbrenner's mesosystem highlights how these connections support development, and I was able to see that firsthand in my placements, working in the after-school program. There's nothing that did not benefit from having open lines of communication. Now, some strategies to build those strong partnerships. Always begin with positive communication. You could use something like ClassDojo or Seesaw to keep those families updated, or even send home, sheets daily to let parents know the things that happen during the day. You want to share visuals and tools that help at home, whether it's just like a folder, just kind of giving like your numbers 1 through 120 and having them work on that stuff at home. Ask families about their cultural preferences and communication style. You want to celebrate those small wins frequently, not only with a student, but you want to celebrate them with the family too. Families are essential partners in our student success. What I learned and my personal reflection. These experiences are continually shaping me as who I want to become as a future educator. I learned that these theories guide us, but these relationships ground us. I learned that behavior communicates needs, identity is fragile in young children, and I learned that structure and compassion are equally important. And I learned that advocacy and equality must be a part of our daily practice. But at the same time, we need to remember that we are also the magic makers for these students, and they may not have that magic at home. So it's our job to not only protect these students, but to make magic for them, whether that's in showing structure or compassion or building these relationships. Now, for my personal reflection, I look back on my field experiences and my current job and everything I've learned in this course. And I realized that becoming an educator is so much more about learning strategies or classroom management. It's really about stepping into this role where you have the power to shape a child's story. These experiences really showed me that I want to be the kind of educator who sees beyond the behaviors or listens for the message underneath the meltdown. A person who honors each child's identity. I learned that even when students can't say it out loud, they're consistently asking us the same questions. Do you see me? Do I matter? Am I safe here? And as future educators, we get to answer those questions through the way we show up every day. And I truly believe, like I said, that we are the magic makers for these students, and we are the ones that can create the conditions where confidence can grow, where learning can feel joyful, and the children can discover who they are meant to be. That kind of magic doesn't come from a curriculum or a strategy. It comes from the way we connect and advocate and believe in our students. And that is a lot. My final encouragement, you can do this. To beginning, all educators, your words matter. Your consistency matters. Your cultural awareness matters. Your advocacy matters. Your spirit matters. Your relationships matter most of all. You are not going to get everything perfect, but if you lead with empathy, structure, realistic expectations, you will absolutely make a difference. And good luck to everyone.
That's all, folks.